Welcome to Third and Fairfax, the official podcast of the Writers Guild of America West. I'm your host, Brian Gary. In our latest episode, I have the pleasure of speaking with creator and showrunner David DiGilio about his action thriller series, The Terminalist, and its prequel spinoff series, The Terminalist: Dark Wolf. We explore character through the lens of psychology and how scripts are living documents, and as always, we talk about a lot more. Listen and subscribe to Third and Fairfax on Spotify, Apple, or Libsyn, and watch us on the Writers Guild of America West's YouTube channel. And now, here's my conversation with David. Today, I have the pleasure of having a conversation with showrunner David DiGilio, currently on The Terminalist. But before we jump in, David, I want to kind of set a little stage, go into the past. Like, what was that show? You know, they bring people in from your past. I'm not going to bring anybody from your past, but I want to kind of talk about your trajectory as an artist and how we got to The Terminalist before we jump into anything specific.
Awesome.
I think one thing that's very interesting about your background is the time at Princeton studying psychology. So what I'm always curious about when people have kind of interesting trajectories into the writing process. I mean, we've had people on the podcast who come from legal. Lots of people come from, they were attorneys and then they make the transition, or they were doctors and they make the transition. We can name several people off, Michael Crichton, for example, off the top of our head, any number of attorneys. Psychology would seem to be a really obvious background for being able to get into characters, but you don't necessarily find a lot of people who have that kind of psychology background who then make that pivot into the creative usage of it. So I'm just curious, from your time at Princeton and as you've evolved as an artist, how is that psychological scientific approach informing your writing and informing your creative side? How do those two sides balance for you?
That's a great question. Thank you. I think, as writers, we are all our lived experience, right? I mean, we bring our lived experience to the voice that we put on the page, the things that we want to write about. For me, I, from a very early age, was interested in human psychology. It started from my work as a young actor. I started as an actor before I became a writer. Up until really my senior year of college, I thought I was going to be a movie star. That was my trajectory. That was a thing from age 8 to 20. That is what I wanted to do. And in my senior year at Princeton, you have to do a senior thesis. And I was a psych major with what was basically a theater minor. And I had, when I got to Princeton, basically become the character actor. I had gone from the leading man, in all my middle school and high school plays and my, summer theater work at the Kennedy Center and things like that, where I was the leading man. I had become that funny guy. Like
There's a great career there, though.
There is. And I mean, truly, some of my favorite actors are character actors. But senior year, I was like, F that. I am the leading man. And so I'm going to do a one-man show that is about the psychology behind serial murder. It was my senior thesis. I was able to do a creative thesis because I was in the acting program, and my advisor in the psychology program really embraced this idea. I found a really interesting theory behind serial murder that was like a fascinating kind of basis for a story. And I looked at it through the character of a serial killer, the psychiatrist who was assigned to that serial killer's court case, and an Irish actor who had come over to the U.S. to play a killer in a Hollywood movie. And so it was these three characters, and I just, took this concept of projective suicide, which is a really wild concept, and turned it into a one-man show and showed everybody that I was the leading man, and then I never acted again. Literally became so interested in writing from doing this that I never acted again. And I think the
Very,
kind of
very
point of the
Eric
story.
Bogosian. You know what I mean?
Yes, yeah.
Very Eric
By the way,
Bogosian.
he was my inspiration for this. That's so wild that you say that. That he was literally my inspiration for this one man show. Um, and so I realized in writing that one man show that wait, why? Like I enjoy acting, but what I really enjoy is getting into the psychology of the character. And if I'm the writer, I can get into the psychology of all of the characters. I can play all the characters. This is wow, like you can explore so many different facets of the human experience by embracing your role as a storyteller and linking it to true fundamental concepts of human psychology. The reason I became a psych major, honestly, it was because I went to a liberal arts school. And I knew I wanted to go into film, but it was not a trade school. It was not a film school. So I just thought about, what are the majors that are going to help me at the time? I thought as an actor, right?
Yeah.
To understand the characters. And I thought about three majors. I considered psychology, English, and history. Those three. I was like, it's going to be one of those three. Really love history. I think we have so much to learn from those who came before us. Obviously, love English, but I'm a really slow reader, like really slow. And so ultimately, I chose psychology because as a teenager, we all wrestle with who are we, right? That's truly like, puberty happens physically, but mentally and emotionally, it comes down to the question of who are we, right? And so I just thought, man, this is the best way to kind of get into characters, right? From the kind of inside out, right? And I had kind of like trained originally through Shakespeare, which is kind of outside in. Yeah. And so here I was kind of thinking I was going to go into kind of the American tradition of acting, which is inside out. And so I picked that major and then truly never acted again after that thesis. And then every single thing that I wrote when I got out of school, I tried to focus on the psychology of the character and combine that with big adventure storytelling. Because I love action and adventure. I love genre storytelling. But I love when it's a little twisted, right? Like Kubrick, right? Like that Nolan. Like I like the guys who like Spielberg too, right? Like who get into genre, but then twist it and make you think about it through a character lens.
It's fascinating that you focused on the serial killer, and also that you challenged yourself. The closest thing that I think writers and actors have to stand-up comedy, which is, the most vulnerable. You're out there, it's you and a mic and the audience and your stuff. And your stuff either works or doesn't work. But the one-man show, and I think Bogosian, whether it was Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll, like a lot of people know him from talk radio and beyond, but those pastiche pieces beforehand. But it's funny you bring up the serial killer. You and I share a kind of a similar set of backgrounds. My education took me through my MFA at the Actors Studio, and so it was acting and playwriting.
Yeah.
And I remember writing specifically a monologue for myself about a serial killer, and in conversation back and forth with with a psychiatrist. So it's like, again, inside that mind that is so different. And you just brought up Shakespeare, and this will be my next question for you. I don't want to misquote you. So if I do misquote you, you'll correct me. I think you said that it's Shakespeare, Spielberg, and Sam Shepard, which I love. My only twist on that would be sorry, Mr. Spielberg, but I would have to replace you with Tom Stoppard.
Nice.
So tell me about those influences, because the delta between Shakespeare and Sam Shepard, and then you're triangulating in with Spielberg. That's a really interesting mix of popular, commercial, and deep tradition. And then Sam Shepard is a singular. That's a singular voice.
No, I think, I can't remember where I gave that quote, but it is very true that those were the kind of three fundamental influences on my life as a storyteller up until I was really, probably 20, 22 years old. I started my kind of like formal training started through classes at the Folger Shakespeare Theater in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
And man, I was like a Shakespeare nerd as a kid.
Have you gone, just a little aside, have you gone into the archive and seen the actual folios that they have, those original sets of folios in the archive?
That was the beginning, right?
Yeah.
And then the Shakespeare Theater moved to the new theater, and I got to see Tom Hulson Hamlet there, and like just like in Amadeus, speaking of Stoppard, right? Like that's my favorite film of all time. So like these things like that influenced me early on were kind of from a classicist, tradition of universal storytelling. Like that was the thing. I was like, man, wow, like Shakespeare, how is he still relevant today? That blew my mind as a teenager, right? And then I saw the great Spielberg films kind of, coincide with my teenage years. I mean, he's still making great films, but like, wow, Empire of the Sun, the impact that movie had on my life, just massive, like absolutely massive, changed how I saw cinema. And then when I get into college, I start to get into Sam Shepard through my work in the theater program. And I see in Shepard somebody who is focused on the American story and Americana through just an unbelievable lens. And I'm from Virginia, from Northern Virginia, and like seeing characters that I relate to through my, my youth and growing up.
Barry Child, True West. I mean,
exactly. And I was, Tilden, Barry Child. I did True West as part of my studies there at Princeton. So like those three influences kind of coalesce in what I want to write when I arrive in Hollywood. But the trick, I think, right, is like Hollywood's changing at the time that I arrive. I start writing in 2000, and it's the beginning of the really property-driven, the intellectual property-driven studio years. And we see the rise of Marvel. We have the new Star Wars films. We have this just like everything has to be based on intellectual property. Yep. And I came out here at that time to be a feature screenwriter, but I loved original ideas. I loved these original stories. And I played inside the world of studio screenwriting. Did, open writing assignment after open writing assignment. Like truly learned at the hands of some of the best. Had Scott Frank as a mentor, Walter Parks as a mentor. Truly like learning this craft, but like I wanted to apply it to original storytelling. And so that was my kind of turn into TV. In my early 30s, I had an idea that was a conspiracy thriller. And my agent at the time, Leslie Maskin at UTA, was like, no, that's TV. And I'm like, what? No, I'm a feature writer. What are you talking about? And she's like, no, TV is where people are doing original ideas. And so it just naturally kind of this need and desire to tell universal original stories that kind of comes, out of that love of those three S's, ends up pushing me down the path of original storytelling via television.
Was that Traveler or Strange Angel? Which one?
That was Traveler. That was Traveler. And then the kind of line between Traveler and Strange Angel is that I had a tough time being a first-time creator. I was 32. I did not understand television at all. And I was at the kind of whim of those who were supposed to understand it, running the show and production, et cetera. And, it was a tough time making that show because honestly, I bear the blame of writing a show that was probably an $8 million show for $2.3 million per episode, right? But I didn't know what I didn't know. So I then went into the WGA's showrunner training program after, after Traveler kind of like, it was a cool show. We had an amazing cast. We had some really cool reception from the fans who actually found it back then. But I knew, I was like, I don't want to ever do that again. I want to understand everything about running a show. And then I cut my teeth as a showrunner running my friend Mark Heyman's show. He was the creator of Strange Angel, and I got to just be what's called the caretaker showrunner. And I got to learn how to really protect the vision of the creator by protecting someone else's vision. And I think for someone like myself, who naturally has a kind of need to please, like it's actually helpful to protect someone else's vision. And then I brought the lessons from that experience into the Terminalist universe when I was back into the kind of creator showrunner chair, working closely with Jack Carr, the creator of the novels, working with Chris Pratt, Antoine, Jared Shaw, great Navy SEAL turned EP, Max Adams, Army Ranger turned EP. This was our shared vision. And now I was kind of had the tools that I needed to protect our vision.
Shout out to Jeff Melvoin.
Yeah.
WGA Showrunners Training Program.
Yes. Fellow Manchester United fan, by the way. Yes.
There you go. And if you're listening, Jeff, and hopefully you're out fishing somewhere, because
yes.
I know he's an avid fisherman.
Yeah. He's great.
As we pivot to Terminalist, you've got a bunch of things going on that we can now attack this from different angles. So obviously there's adaptation. So a twist on the adaptation, especially as you move into the season 2, which is a combination of adaptation and now creative license that you're taking. And then I think there's something very fascinating about the serial killer component, because from a psychological standpoint, what it takes, the mental discipline that it takes to be that high performant of a soldier, to be a special forces soldier, and the commitment and the mental strength and fortitude. I'm not saying they're serial killers, so don't anybody blow me up on the show. Yeah. But what I'm saying is there are similarities in terms of those character profiles and being able to show someone with that level of focus and determination. So I'm just curious, as you're like pulling all these threads together, adaptation, you're looking at your 3 S's across the top, and you've got this, pretty beloved in the car, underlying material, that you're now having this broader canvas to be able to explore, not in a feature, back in TV. And, let's dive into season 1, season 2, Terminalist.
Great. Yeah. So, and yes, to your point, 100% special operators are not serial killers. Let's make that very clear. No one blow this man up. He's not saying that. No. It is. But the question in terms of the psychological underpinnings of exploring characters who deal with violence, like that is a fascinating place to go. And Jack Carr knew that for his first novel, that he wanted to do a revenge tale, because he understood that vengeance is one of the most fundamental human traits to explore and grabs a reader. And he thought, Jack is so smart, both as a storyteller, but as someone who knows his audience and interacts so carefully with that audience. He had multiple kind of ideas for what the first story, what the first novel could be. And he ultimately went with revenge because he knew immediately people would dive into who is James Reese and why is he doing what he's doing. And for me, coming into this project, at that time, it was fall of 2019. I was coming off of 2 seasons of Strange Angel. I was looking for what's next. I wanted to get back into the kind of creator showrunner role. And I read the book and was immediately hooked by the authenticity of that book. Like the lived experience of Jack Carr is on every page of that novel. Every weapon, every vehicle, every watch is a character in the show. It's so cool, like how deep he goes into tradecraft and authenticity. And then, but for me, from that psychological point of view, right? Here is a guy who is not only on a path of vengeance, but he's dealing with a brain tumor that was put in his head by a conspiracy. And that for me was like the hook. I was like, wow, what if he's an unreliable narrator? What if you cannot trust what he's seen because he can't trust what he's seen? And what if we're not dealing with the notion of flashback? What if we're dealing with something called conflation? I think at the time of the pitch, I called it an engram, but ultimately we landed on the term conflation. So like his timelines start to fold in on each other. He becomes unstuck in time. And like Slaughterhouse-Five, big inspiration for us as well. So that combination of that psychological question and an unreliable narrator plus the authentic tradecraft from Carr's novel, like that was the thing that got Chris excited, that got Antoine excited, got MRC, and then ultimately we ended up in this bidding war of the top streamers who are pumped about this, and that becomes the basis for season 1. And back to your kind of original question, I think the thing that makes the shows really unique, and the thing that is the tie to the psychology of violence, is that we do violence with consequence. Like that's a fundamental tenet of this show. We do not glorify violence. We show the consequence of violence on not just the people who it happens to, but on the perpetrators of the violence itself. And that's something that comes from Jack as well. Like he dives deep through the internal monologue of his characters about, like, I'm going to have to become the thing that I have fought against in order to exact my vengeance. What is the toll of that choice? And that is frickin' like next level, to take special operators and humanize them, because too often they are either politicized or they are shown as superheroes. It's like, no, they're human beings. They have these skills. They also have these flaws. They are all of us. And to me, like growing up inside the Beltway in the 80s and 90s, the military is something that really brought everyone together. It was a common cause. And I think what's awesome is, like, as we make these shows, we have people from both sides of the aisle. You see the fan response from both sides of the aisle, because that kind of theme of the individual versus the institution, of not exploiting the people who fight so hard for our country. Those are universal themes. And yeah, it's been a wild ride since then.
A couple of questions for you, but one of the themes that does come through is that there is a specialness to the United States military that's rather unique in human history, and that it's a fighting force whose allegiance is to an idea and a principle, not a person. And I think that when especially in season 1, when that is betrayed, then you end up having this wonderful drama. So my question for you is that these shows require, balance on the head of a pin. Okay.
Yeah.
Because you talk about consequence. Like, we all remember Arnold Schwarzenegger in Commando, and the body count was just like so high, and it didn't matter. And it's just like spraying bullets everywhere. It's like, there's like that world, there are no consequences. So that's the world of zero consequences.
Yeah.
At the same time, we have our friend David Mamet, who would say information is the enemy of drama. And so whenever you have a choice between exposition and drama, you're always choosing drama. However, you have a responsibility, and since you've set a world of consequences, you have a responsibility to authenticity, which is displaying and portraying these characters in the situations in which are authentic enough, but without sacrificing drama. So it's this balancing act of all of these, sometimes aligning, often competing elements, that you, as the showrunner, the buck stops with you. Like, we had Noah Hawley on recently, and he's almost like he was referring to himself as the decider in chief. Like, he's got to make decisions. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, I got to make decisions on the day, red shirt, green shirt, like whatever. But you also have big decisions to make, and balancing decisions that have, to your own creative output, consequences. So you have
Yes.
consequences to deal with too. So I'm curious how you handle that balancing act.
Yeah, I saw that clip of Noah and that decider in chief. That's such a great thing. I mean, we have a concept in making these shows, and it came out of, we knew after season one hit that we wanted to expand the Jack Carr Cinevision universe, as Chris calls it, and Dark Wolf is our first spinoff as we expand this universe of shows. And the key element to this is we didn't want to just make new shows. We wanted to make a new way to make shows, and we call it team television. And I think it's the thing that is in common with what Noah said is like, I'm the showrunner, but really I'm the curator of ideas, because this is not my lived experience, right? I'm not a special operator. I'm not a military veteran. I'm somebody who has enormous respect for those communities. But I have on this team this incredible group of special operator, military veteran, EPs, and storytellers. So whether it's Jack or Jared Shaw or Max Adams, Ray Mendoza is another key team member. He's the co-director, co-writer of Warfare, which was incredible.
Yeah.
So these guys bring their lived experience to these adaptations. And I find that like my role is very much about highlighting the authenticity that they care so deeply about, that I, Chris, Antoine, we care so deeply about, right? But then also making sure that the character and the cinematic experience of that action go hand in hand, right? It has to be character driven all the time. And we all want that experience, but like marrying those two things is hard. And it involves making sure that you are not dictatorial, right? That you understand that the best idea has to win. You have to understand that the script is a living and breathing entity until the moment it is captured inside the rectangle. And that you have to be willing to stop down and have the conversation about what is the best idea or best expression of this idea. And that is what I absolutely love about this show, is I think not just that these stories, like Dark Wolf is hitting in a completely different way that Terminus did, right? That was like this season one Terminus. It's this hardcore revenge tale. Everybody is in that journey with Chris Pratt. We go into season one of Dark Wolf, and here you are with Ben Edwards, this character who represents a different side of the hero. One, like you could kind of characterize them via the title, right? Ben is the Dark Wolf. He's the one who's feeding the Dark Wolf. He thinks he can control the Dark Wolf, but the Dark Wolf is in there. James Reese, he's a Light Wolf, right? He can do Dark Wolf things, but at the heart of that character is the Light Wolf. So two very different experiences, right? Two very different characters, but both are rooted in authenticity. Both are true expressions of these special operators, because truly you work with these guys. It's just like in your writer's room. You can have people of every different background who are fighting for the same cause to tell a great story. That's the same thing with our special operators.
It's what I love about the title of the piece is, I'm sure you've come across this, but for our listeners who haven't, there's an age-old proverb. Now,
Yep.
depending on who you have it tell you, we'll attribute it to any number of places, and
Yes.
usually whatever is in proximity to their, it's either Native American or it's Indian or it's Chinese or whatever the case is, because there are wolves in all parts, and wolves are part of our psyche, just like snakes and dragons are part of our psyche.
Yep.
But the way that the adage goes is, there are two wolves inside of any person. One is full of greed and avarice, and one is full of love and empathy. And the question is, which one will win? And the answer is the one you feed.
Yes.
Now, What most people leave out, though, is the latter part of it, which isn't often said, which is what I find percolating all throughout your series is even if you starve one of those wolves to near death, it's only ever one meal away.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you suppress the darkness or you suppress the light, all you have to do is feed one of those and they can come alive again. It's never vanquished. It's never killed, you know? And so I love how all of those themes are playing out on a story level, independent of what you guys are doing and you're portraying of these events and these characters in this time, in this place. There's thematic storytelling that's very archetypal that I think is probably one of the reasons, again, now this is my opinion, one of the reasons of your success with this show is that you don't have to be, you know, quote unquote, into special forces to feel the emotional pull and gravity of this show because it's working on a story level.
That's exactly right. Well said. You know, I think one of the things that people discount.
I'm sorry, there's no question in there, but like,
no.
Please respond.
It's fantastic. It's one of the things that, you know, certainly fans of Jack Carr understand, but to those who are kind of fans of the shows and don't know the novels, like he is not just a man of action, he is a man of letters. And by what I mean by that is he truly loves history. He is all about history. He's been reading books, just devouring books and nonfiction and fiction alike since he was, 5-6 years old. And what comes from that is a recognition of the timeless quality of stories about warriors, right? Whether it's the Iliad,
it's our first archetype,
Fleming,
the warrior,
right?
Yeah,
right. Whether it's the Iliad or Ian Fleming, right? Like he loves these stories, and I do as well. I don't have the same. I'm not as well read as Jack, but man, do I have the same love of those stories. And what's awesome as well is, like you mentioned, Commando. We reference that. We reference Schwarzenegger films all the time because we're both children in the 80s and grew up with that. And so we love the kind of fun of those films as well, right? So it is it's incumbent on us as we adapt these books or branch out and build out worlds around these characters that we maintain the timeless quality of the stories that we're telling. And a big thing you'll see throughout the shows is you'll see gatherings around the fire. It's one of my favorite scenes from the pilot of Dark Wolf, and the fans, I think, as well, is the guys sitting around that fire at the FOB. And the brotherhood that is expressed and the friendship that you feel between those characters is so real because, frankly, it is real. It's off camera. And you see it with our cast and our crew. And I think it comes from this notion of team television and that everybody's idea truly matters. Like truly matters. And we don't just say, do this thing on the page. We say, what's your interpretation of this thing on the page? Oh, wow, that's different than what we thought about in the writer's room. But you know what? That's actually more interesting. Yeah, let's run with it. Can we do that? Jared, Max, is that authentic? Can we do that? Okay, yeah. Okay, boom. And then we've made a pivot. And then we're chasing a gun battle instead of a knife fight. You know, things like that will happen. A romance will turn from being about lust to being about unrequited love. These things happen in the process of making a show. And I think it's very important as storytellers that we're not too rigid in our ways. I think it's like the true expression of a moment comes from a character-driven, psychologically real expression of that idea, right? And you won't really know that when you're in your office in a vacuum typing away at a computer.
One last big question for you, then I have a couple small, we'll call them lightning rounds. Last big question. You look at Traveler. You look at, let's say we'll go Traveler, we'll go Strange Angel, and now Terminalist.
Yep.
As you look at that trajectory, and then you lay, like, remember the old onion paper? You have like of the skeleton, and then you
Yeah.
draw the nervous system over it and everything. So
Yes.
as you layer on the various aspects of your creative career, what are the things that you can look back in Traveler and Strange Angel that prepared you to be able to have team television? Which I'm getting a sense of, like, this is a fulsome expression for you of the creative process with your collaborative team. And so I'm sure you can look back and say, well, this good or bad and this good or bad kind of pointed me in this direction.
Oh man, that's a great question. It's because it's not like how do you evolve as a storyteller. What you're asking is how do you evolve as a writer producer and as a leader? Because I think that's another thing that is really important for writers to understand when they go into television. If you are going to become a showrunner, you are going to become a leader. You are a CEO of a 300 to 500 person company. Your budget for that company could be anywhere from $50 to $150 million for a year of work. You have to understand how to lead. And I think for myself, while the storytelling things that I'm excited about, that friendship, teamwork, brotherhood, those things, right? That those I think have remained fairly consistent from the beginning. Even when I was working on my first film for Disney, that was about teamwork, right? It was a team of sled dogs, but it was about teamwork and friendship. While those things have remained consistent, I think the thing that is the path or the evolution is being a leader and understanding what that entails and learning how to protect the vision of the show, but also learning how to work with your studio and work with your network and understand that this is a business. That is a hard thing as an artist to understand when you arrive here. Certainly, I think as 20-year-olds or 30-year-olds, like being a leader to a group of men and women that are leaving their families, right? Sometimes for 7 or 8 months to make a show, like our show Globetrots, season 2 of The Terminalist, which is based on Jack's book True Believer. We were in South Africa. We were in North America between Toronto, little filming here in LA, and then Morocco. Like, we were gone for a long time. And just before that, we were in Budapest filming Dark Wolf. So you, I think, as an artist, have to learn how to inspire the people around you. And I think a huge part of team television comes from this like understanding that you only kind of get through time doing this work, that it is exceptionally difficult to make big television or big films, right? Even small TV, it's all exceptionally difficult. There's never enough time. There's never enough money. But your job is to deliver on time and on budget, right? So how do you do that? Well, you have to get the best out of the people working around you. And the way to get the best out of them is not to tell them what to do. It's to empower them. And for me, I was fully detached on Traveler. I was just, first time creator. I was just in an office writing scripts and getting in the edit. I was never really part of production. I was in the writer's room in Los Angeles, and they were remote production up in Vancouver. Then with Strange Angel, we shot that show here in LA. And it was 1930s, 40s Los Angeles. It was period LA. I'm not from LA. I don't know what it was like here. I can read books. I can do those things. So it was about empowering people like our production designer, Warren Allen Young, right? Our cinematographer, Armando Salas, like working with these incredible artists, empowering them, right? And then seeing what they brought to the table and seeing Mark's excitement around what they brought to the table. To me, that's where it really started to click in. And then when I got to the Terminalist shows, I was like, oh man, here we go. I want to empower the people with the lived experience. I'm going to empower the craftspeople. And this goes all the way from your department heads down to like our on-set dresser up in Toronto. We were doing a scene where we needed a song that spoke to revolutionary feelings inside Cold War Russia. That's like a tiny little, narrow gap. And our on-set overhears us talking in Video Village, and he's like, my dad was a rebel. He had this song that he played for us all the time. And we're like, really, what was it? And he pulls it up on YouTube, and we're like, that's going in the show. That's team television. You empower everybody who's part of the process to bring everything they have every day.
So I've got 2 lightning round questions for you, and this is a shout out to our amazing post team, Moises, Greg. Yeah. Moises puts these pieces together, and so we always like to give them a few little juicy tidbits at the end of the show. But if you're listening to it, these are additive as well. So when you're listening to a pitch in the writer's room, okay, let's take it. We'll go to that part of the process. You gave us some really wonderful anecdotes through production and everything, how that team's going. But when you're breaking the story, and this could be original content, or you can talk about what it's like in the terminal list, where you actually have a framework from which you're pulling from. But either way, what is it about an idea that all of a sudden sparks for you? And again, it could be like it hits a part of my brain, or it like I love when there's a hook and a something, like, whatever it is. But you're surrounded by intelligent people. They're all going to have good ideas, but some of them just hit. And I'm just curious for you, which is entirely subjective. What is that?
It's a great question about what sparks us inside a writer's room. I'm going to actually do a slight twist on this, okay? Because I think when a good idea hits, everybody knows it. And I don't think, it's not hard to understand what it is. It's usually that it's something you didn't expect, right? Or it's something that nails a character motivation, right? And clarifies a scene. Those are all, I think, like pretty readily apparent for everyone. I think what's actually unique, or not unique to our writer's room, but hopefully, something that is part of our DNA and our writer's room that I hope is in others, is what we call the yes and writer's room, right? It's one of the kind of guiding principles of theatrical and comedy improv, yes and. And the idea that I like to foster is that sometimes people will pitch without fully understanding what they're pitching. And if you shut them down because it's not right, if you shut them down prematurely, you actually might rob yourself of discovery. So instead, what we try to do is we say, well, yeah, that's cool. That kind of, points to that. And maybe it could point to that. And your job as a showrunner, or whether you're number 2 or 3 in the room and you're running the room, I think your job is to guide your writers towards the thing that they might not fully understand yet, but you feel in your gut. And through curating and really just encouraging people to keep pitching, that's where I think the most interesting ideas often come from. It's just the thing you didn't expect. And then suddenly there's a breakthrough and everybody in the room goes, oh my God, that's the thing we're missing. Oh, and we have to change that thing in Act 1. Let's go back and change that. But it has to come from, again, people feeling empowered and fearless in a room. You can't shut people down when they get something wrong. And you can't just reward the thing that is right when it's right out of the gate. You have to encourage people to have this kind of like creative, collaborative soup that you're all making together. And then those ingredients go in, and then boom, you find the right combo. And that's the most exciting part of the job for me, definitely.
The Terminalist Season 3, Jambalaya. Last question for you. As writers, we have many currencies. We've got time as our currency. We have our effort as our currency. For me, I always like to lean into curiosity as a currency. So I am curious about, what are you curious about? What are the things that just like, that's really interesting. I wonder what that's about. And who knows, it might turn into a show, might turn into an episode, might turn into just something that you talk about at a cocktail party that you found fascinating. But right now, is something in the last couple of weeks that has made you, it's like it sparked your curiosity.
Oh, thank you. That's very cool. I think, by the way, I'll add one more thing to what is your
Sure.
currency as a writer. It's something we borrow from the special operations community. Your reputation is your currency. And I think it's so important also for writers to understand that, because we get a lot of pressure to sell out on our vision or sell out, for commercial gain. But truly stay true to what you want to be as a storyteller. That will build your reputation and people will discover that. But
Bravo,
in terms of things that I am curious about, I am fascinated by and truly love the documentary on HBO Max, 100-Foot Wave. I'm not a surfer, but there is an existential quality to that show that I think has to do with our fundamental relationship with nature, that I just can't get enough of. And I think stories about our relationship with nature, I think that right now is something I'm very, very into. I just think, we're in a changing moment in the world here, and, we are losing touch with our kind of natural existence. So I really am curious about exploring that more. It's heavily kind of featured in the Terminalist True Believer in the first episodes with James Reese. It's kind of how he repairs himself. But that to me, I think, is something I want to see more storytelling built around man's relationship with nature. I think I can't wait for some of the great kind of naturalist filmmaking to come back.
And if you'd like to know any difference, the fundamental difference between David DiGilio and Brian Gary, it is our choices of documentaries on HBO. I would have said, have you seen Yacht Rock?
I've heard good things.
You know what? I've seen them both, and there's something so simple and joyful about that Yacht Rock documentary, and everybody who is making it just had fun, and you have fun watching it. So there you go. Yacht Rock for BG, and DG is 100-Foot Wave. You can tell the seriousnesses of our two reputations at play. David, it's been a wonderful conversation. Thank you for joining us here on Third and Fairfax.
Thank you so much.
Stay tuned for all the amazing things, not only in the Terminalist universe that you're churning out, but who knows, some eco-terrorists, some eco-disaster. I mean, Jerry Butler has to fight some other kind of disaster coming up, right? So
that's exactly right.
He needs some work. So it's time to get to effort. David, thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. Appreciate what you do, and appreciate all the guild members out there. Thank you, guys.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Third and Fairfax. You can listen and subscribe to Third and Fairfax on Spotify, Apple, and Libsyn, and watch us on the Writers Guild of America West's YouTube channel. Also check out writtenby.com, the Guild's online publication, for more on writer craft, career, and union life. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.